So today on Dreammakers Academy, I'm going to welcome one of the members from the community for some one-on-one coaching time. And so I'd like you all to meet Espen. And Espen, why don't you tell us a little bit about what you're working with at the moment?
Of course, and thank you very much for letting me being a part of this, Adam.
You're
I'm
very welcome.
basically making a podcast that is focusing on interviewing successful entrepreneurs about their stories,
Hmm.
their ups and downs, and basically having a dialogue with them about uh, their whole journey and what advices they will give other entrepreneurs.
Okay. And it's a Danish language podcast, is that right?
Yes, it is.
And
Yeah.
what's the name of the podcast so that everybody can
It's
go and
called
check it out?
iværksætterhistorie.
Okay, that's a really hard one to pronounce, so we'll
Yeah,
make
exactly.
sure we
But
put the
translated, it's called entrepreneurial stories.
Entrepreneurial Stories. Great name. So we'll put that in the comments so that people, if they're interested, could find it. And how long have you been working on the podcast now?
Well, actually, it wasn't me starting it. It was my partner Uffe who made the first 10 episodes, and I'm a big podcast fan. So uh, I texted him and said I loved the podcast, and why is not anything new coming up? And he said he's busy with his job and so on. So I basically just asked him if he wanted me to get on board, and he accepted that. And then since we got another partner in, so we are three people doing this. One sitting here on Funen, one sitting in Copenhagen, and one sitting in Jutland. So we kind of have the whole aspect of the Danish entrepreneurial ecosystem.
Okay.
And we just, I think we are up at 15 episodes so far. And yeah, that's where we are at the moment.
So how many people do you have listening to your podcast, roughly?
Well, we can see that the number is increasing for every single time that we are releasing one of the episodes, and at the moment we have around 2,000 downloads a month, and we expect that we will get around 100,000 website visitors. We just landed. I'm not sure if I can next say that, but I do it anyway.
Hmm.
But we just landed a partnership with a news media called Bootstrapping DK. So they will help pushing it out to their audience. So 100,000 website viewers, around 2,000 downloads a month.
Okay.
And that
And your
this is
website
just with
viewers
the setup.
is that a month you're getting 100,000?
No, it's a year,
Oh, okay,
and it's
right.
it's just an estimate, but it's with an estimate of what we're doing now, and it's without having the partnership with bootstrapping. It's without doing anything additional, but we want to look into what could we do, how could we add extra value,
Yeah.
and I obviously have some ideas, but I'm not sure if how to validate them, and which one to pursue with.
Yeah.
Because in we are just doing this as a hobby thing, but we would like to make it a business.
Yeah,
And
it would
since
be
we
good to
estimate
take to the next
100,000
level.
website viewers, I think it's possible in one way or another.
Yeah, for sure. And there's so much that you can do with podcasting and content creation. It's a really exciting area, and now is definitely the time to get into it. So there's a lot of potential. But you sent me some questions to look at beforehand. So we're going to deal with about 5 of your top burning questions right now. And then we can see as time goes on, we'll check in with you in a month or so and see how things are going, especially with this new partnership that sounds really exciting. So I'm excited to keep up with you to see how it's going. But what was your number one question? Like your biggest problem at the moment?
How do we earn money? I mean, we are not taking anything, and we don't really have any cost either. We're doing it all online. Obviously, we have some web hosting and domain stuff, but
Hmm.
we don't really have any cost. I mean, I've looked into the options, but I'm not sure of what to pursue with. You can earn money on advertisements, Google AdSense.
Mm.
You can do affiliate marketing by putting up ads as well. We could make donations there's something called patrons,
Hmm.
where the listeners can go in voluntarily and say that I will pay 10 krona, 20 krona, or like €1 or €2 for every episode that is released.
Yeah.
But it's kind of hard to get them to do that, even though we haven't done it yet. But I know from other podcasts that it's hard to get the viewers to go in and actually do that, because they are listening to this while they're driving, while they are out exercising and these things. So it's not like you can put any kind of link because it's audio. So that's hard, which also leads me to the other questions of how do we get feedback. So these two things is hard because they are on the run, and how do
Yeah.
Yeah.
How do you make money from a podcast? And it's actually a really tricky one. You're absolutely right. The biggest problem or challenge with podcasts is people are typically away from their device when they're listening to them. What I mean is, it's in their pocket, it's in their car, they're not directly looking at a screen. It's more like a radio show. And when you think about just how hard regular radio shows try to promote their phone-ins, they have to give away huge tickets to concerts and things just to get audience engagement. So that can be a big, big struggle. But the good news is, because you're sort of bootstrapping your podcast at the moment, as you say, it's not really costing you very much money, a little bit of web hosting and a little bit of expenses, but at the moment it's a hobby. And so what you've got to think about is, what are the goals of where you want to take the podcast? And perhaps it'd be wonderful if you could earn enough money to do it full time, but maybe it's enough just to earn a little bit of pocket money just to get a bit better equipment and that kind of thing. Because you're right in that you can put advertising or Google AdSense on your webpage, and you can put affiliate links and things like that. And that's a pretty straightforward thing to do. It doesn't take very long to do. You can try it, but to be honest, you need an awful lot of traffic for that to really make a significant impact. You might get enough money for a beer on a Friday or something like that. The Patreon model is a little different. That's when you have super fans who are desperate to pay for additional content. The trouble with that is you have to lead with free content and then give bonus content that people are willing to pay for. And that means that it's sort of almost like a paywall kind of business model. And this means that you have to create new content all the time, and you have to do the annoying thing of something like, oh, here's 4 great tips from entrepreneurs, but if you want the really good 5th one, you've got to pay extra. And for some audiences, it can really frustrate them.
Okay. I don't think it's like that, Adam. To be honest, when you do Patreon, it's just donation based that goes ongoing for every episode that is launched. You don't have to give them extra value.
Okay, no, you're right in that. Yeah, you can use Patreon just to collect weekly or monthly donations, but ideally, the ones that perform best give the people who donate a little bit extra. Sometimes it's a mention on a video, or sometimes it's extra photographs or some extra behind-the-scenes content, especially if you want to make the most out of Patreon, where you can have different tier levels. So you say, well, if you give me a bit more money, I can give you a bit more things. It depends what kind of business model you want to go for.
So if I had to do that, what extra value could that be? So see, this is where I have some ideas.
Okay.
We are thinking about, because I also do some startup events once in a while in different cities in the country. So I know how to do the events and get in contact with people. But this could be one way to create extra value. If you do the patrons, you can come for free to see one of these interviews live. That would be one way, or to meet those that we have interviewed at a networking event. Mm-hmm. But if you haven't done the Patreon, you have to pay.
Yeah, and they're really great ideas. And what I would suggest you do is to test out some of your ideas by simply surveying your audience. Now, you might not know exactly who is downloading your podcast, but it can be quite easy to say in the next recording of the podcast, right at the top of the show, give people 3 or 4 options and ask what they would like the most. And you can then point them towards an online survey or a Facebook page where they can vote or something like that. So you can say, what would you prefer? Would you prefer to meet the people that we're interviewing? Would you like to be interviewed yourself? Would you like to get a free t-shirt? Would you like to come to the event? Would you like to, whatever it is. And then you can start to see what your audiences value, because they may value very different things. And I've often been surprised when I'm working on projects and I'm not entirely sure how my audience is going to react. I always make sure that I go and talk to them first and find out what really gives them value. Another thing that you can think of is, at the moment, a lot of these the ideas that you have for monetization, it's like spreading the cost between all of your audience members. So let's imagine each one of your audience members gives you $1 or something like that, or each one of your audience members clicks on an affiliate link or sees some AdSense ads. That's great because your revenue increases as you get more users, but it perhaps doesn't help you right now when you're small and in that growth phase. So what I would do is a little bit different from just running advertising. I would look at how my podcast and my activities in making that podcast can benefit other people, because it may be that you bring on board 1 or 2 sponsors who can really get the benefit from your podcast. So I was thinking that a great example could be, because you're talking to lots of businesses and they're telling all of their stories of success and startups and failures and all of their good advice, it could be interesting to contact, for example, business schools. And if you work with business schools, you could say, okay, which kind of businesses are the business schools interested in? And you work with them. They might even pay you money to go out and interview a whole series of different people or different businesses, and then bring that podcast back into the classroom. And that way the school could become a sponsor for it.
This is a great idea.
Yeah, and that way you only have to sell it once. You don't have to beg people for money. You don't have to hope that they click on the right link or hope that there's an affiliate program that your customers like.
No.
You don't have to worry about what people are listening to and that they can't click, because you find a school, a business academy, a business group, a startup club. It could be anything, whether it's a co-working space, whatever. And then you put there a nice little advert brought to you by this school, that school. And it will also give you extra value, because then you can even interview the professors at the school, you can interview the students at the school, and it will give you a direct link to some of your audience. So if you've got 30 students in a typical class and they're listening to your podcast because it's part of their curriculum, then you're going to get great feedback from those 30 students. And the beauty of it is, once you say a school in Copenhagen has bought it, then a school in Aarhus will buy it, and a school in Odense will buy it, and you just then you don't have to do any additional work. You just shop it around, and maybe they would even give you a list of, say, 12 different businesses that they want interviewing. You've then got the weight of a school or university behind you, so you're more likely to get those interviews as well. Maybe not just with startups, but with larger companies. As well.
It's a great idea, actually, to get in contact with the student incubators and so on. And the only hesitation I have regarding it is that we also want to ensure that there's a certain quality of startups and startup stories in our podcast. I mean, we've been contacted about with a few, and we're like, yeah, this is not super interesting. We also want somebody with some momentum. momentum, PR-wise, because this is basically what we're providing, free PR. We're not interested super much in the top entrepreneurial people in Denmark, because you have already heard about them everywhere. Jesper Buch from Just Eat, the new Minister of Education and Science, Tommy Ahlers, all those. We're not super. It could be not interesting in another format, but we want those that are just beneath, those that are in a growth phase, that just don't. People that don't have an idea, but they are in the growing phase. They already got investment, and now they are growing.
Yeah, those hidden gems.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So the reason I'm hesitating a little bit is that if we are required to do a podcast from each incubator, they need to have a certain quality also of the people that are in it. If that makes sense.
Yeah.
If all of them are just ideas, and all of them are just agencies working with consultancy of web design or something like that, it's not super sexy.
Yeah.
Honestly.
You're right.
Yeah.
And the easy way to get around that is to make a very strong mission statement, or a style book or something like that. So myself and Steffi, forever, whenever we do new events, we always write down exactly what kind of people we're looking for and exactly the criteria of what it's going to be to make it onto the stage or into the show. I think
that's important.
Because then when you go to the school might say, oh, this is wonderful. We've got 10 really rubbish students who are doing really rubbish startups and they need promotion, so you should just go and interview them. But it may be that you say, we only interview startups with a turnover of this much, or people who have seen this much growth, or whatever it is that you think makes it exciting. And you can always have an open audition where those 10 rubbish students come to talk to you for over a cup of coffee for 5 minutes, and out of those 10, maybe one of them has got what it takes. But as long as you're really clear when you go to the school or whoever it is that you're partnering with, because that way as well, you'll find a school that is able to provide you with, or an incubator or whatever, that's able to provide you with the right kind of people that you want. And because you've already got your 15 or so episodes already, you can use those as an indicator, and you can say it's going to be like this, because it's likely that the school or university will buy in to your content. They will want what you do, but maybe they will want to suggest a list of companies. And a great way to get around it is if you make all of these requirements and say, oh, I'll make 10 episodes with you, but you've got to recommend 30 companies that I should talk to. And then it allows you to discard 2/3 of the ones that you think that your audience are not
I think that's hard. I mean, it's a great idea to collaborate with the incubators, but having them to pay and making us guarantee we will actually interview of them is not suitable. What we could do is to make a free collaboration with them, saying that we are basically doing PR, and here is what you'll get. You get this amount of downloads, this amount of traffic, and then say to them that if they know somebody in the environment that could be interested, they can pay us to actually do that PR thing, because you know how hard it can be to get PR. So paying for 500 kroners or 1,000 kroner for that matter to be a part of a podcast might not be much, but I don't have any evidence for it. I can just say that there's two added values. With the new partnership with Bootstrapping, they also get access to 2,500 investors. And the investors is not interested in Jesper Buch and Tommy Ahlers and those people. They're interested in the people at the incubators that are growing. So they get that's one value, and the other value is that in the format we ask the entrepreneurs to come with with a problem they have, right? So they can, for instance, one of them have said they needed help with how to do extra sales on Instagram, or how to be more confident standing in front of these investors, so they can actually get feedback from the other listeners, if that makes sense.
Yeah. No, that's great. But you've got lots of different points there. I'd like to go back a little bit and remind you, don't be afraid to ask for money. That's something, if you say, oh, I don't know if people will pay for a certain thing, don't be afraid to ask for money. And you can always, if you're a little bit unsure, if you can deliver all of the right interviews at the right time, you can say you pay us on completion. So if they're not happy with it, then you don't charge them anything.
Yes.
Or you can do it on a per episode system. So you can say, look, why don't you start off with the first episode and we'll give you a super discount price. We'll do a good job with interviewing company number 1. And then if you like it, we'll do the other 9 companies for this much. So that way as well, you get to find out if they're working. And another thing that you can also think about doing, which is a little bit about what you're touching on, is thinking about how your podcast activities can benefit everybody. And it's great that you're saying, if you come on this podcast, you get free publicity. So that's a real straightforward one. But the thing is, every other podcast is also free publicity. So is there something that you can bring extra to it? And a great way to add value is, if you're doing an activity like you're going to interview somebody, find a way that you can combine things from different worlds that are coming together just from your podcast. So a great example could be if you find, I don't know, let's say, for example, a bank, and the bank wants to encourage new startups. So you get the bank to sponsor a financial advisor or something who also comes in on the podcast. So when you say, I'm going to interview you all about your business, you can say, actually, I'm going to interview you for the first 15 minutes all about your business. And then for the next 5 minutes, a financial advisor is going to come and he's going to look over everything and tell you how you can make more profit. So the bank loves it because their financial advisor is getting the PR. Your company loves it because they're getting the PR, and they're getting something together for a collaboration. And it gives a further incentive for new startups. Now, it may not be that a bank is the right mix, but you can find anybody who's got an interest in helping your existing customers and finding that magic. So
it's a great idea. I love the idea, and other podcasters are doing similar things. However, it will require that we change the format, because the format is their story, if you may. So it's just basically a dialogue about it. So how did you get started? How did you get your idea? What about the team and stuff like that? Mm-hmm. But I mean, we are open. If we figure out that we'll create more value by having sort of a pitching session, where we are not presenting them, they're presenting themselves, and there's some mentors, like a financial advisor or something like that, sitting next to, and then asking questions, and then it's a dialogue. There's a very famous podcast called Die 6 Hatte, the 6 thinking hats. Mm-hmm. But they stopped like a year ago, and everybody's like, what happened? And this is why we are getting momentum, because people want to hear some other things, right? So it's a possibility we could move into and make a setup like that.
Yeah, because one of the things, I was looking through the notes beforehand, and one of the people that I wanted to point in your direction is a wonderful, wonderful woman. Her name is Cecile Hansen, and she's super, super smart. And she's actually doing a similar thing to you. She started off in Berlin with a startup incubator group, and she was hanging around all of these people with new startups and new businesses, just like you are now. And she realized that there wasn't really a guide to all of the startups that were in Berlin. because they were sort of, many of them would be out of business in 6 months. But she wanted to capture this kind of element. So she found, a graphic designer and a writer, and she went around and she interviewed all of the quirky, interesting startups and put them in a book. And the first book took her ages. It was a real labor of love. It was really tricky. And then what happened was, when she launched the book, everybody who was in the startups bought a copy, and everyone's mom and auntie and uncle bought a copy because they were so pleased to see their kids' new company in the book. And then other people started to be really interested in the book because the local community, the councils, the communes, would be really interested in saying, hey, look what is happening in Berlin for these latest startups. And it recovered its costs after the first launch, and then it started to make a little bit of money. And once she'd made that first book, it was so easy every year or so to update the book with the latest startups, because she had a system. And she could also do it in London, and I know she's just about to start one in New York. And she goes around the world to different cities doing the exact same formula, because now it's become profitable and it's become easier. So and I'd love to connect you with her, so I will tag her in this video when it goes out online.
I actually heard about her before. I've seen her on LinkedIn, and since she got great success with these books. Another guy who've done the same, something similar, is Jonathan Løv, here from Denmark, who made the Guru book. It's basically a lot of entrepreneurs making blogs in the book. And that was one way I was thinking also about, when we have reached 50 interviews or 100 interviews, that we could translate it all to a book, an ebook or something like that. So that's also a way to perhaps create a revenue.
Yeah, because that was one of your other questions about how do we go about making a book from the content. And I think this is a smart idea, because podcasts in general, people are used to getting for free, but books are great because people are used to paying for them.
Pay for it,
and that way you're using a similar content, but you can transpose it from the perceived free space to the perceived pay space. We see this all the time in that, like with illegal downloads of music, people are used to getting their music for free, but they're still used to paying a lot of money to go to concerts. So we see this shift. And maybe this is something to look at as well, is that maybe you don't make money directly from your podcast, but maybe you get money from the things that people are used to paying for.
Yeah, so indirectly. I think that's also what I'm thinking about we will do. So the advertisement is one way, might not give a lot. Donation is one way, might not give a lot. Events is another way to do it, but it might not give a lot either. But I think the book thing might be the way where we could create a revenue. I checked that it will cost around 100 kroner to make one book. I don't know how much it will be valued at, but if you sell 200 books or 500 books, it's getting somewhere,
Yeah, that's right. You don't have to sell many books to make a profit. And the nice thing about book creation is it's a lot easier than a lot of people think. And so I've made some notes for you, because this is something that I really like to do when I'm at university. It's all about writing, it's all about publishing, all that kind of stuff. So the first thing to think about with a book is, before you make a physical copy, ask, can you make a PDF or an ebook? These are so super easy to do. The cost is close to zero, and you can make an ebook, chapter by chapter, so that you can tell people if your book is going to sell for $20 and it's going to have 10 chapters in, you make a PDF of chapter 1 and sell it for $2, and then say, next month we'll make chapter 2, next month we'll make chapter 3, next month we'll make chapter 4, and so you can get it early if you want. And what that will allow you,
the first chapter for free.
Yeah, you can give away the first
And so
chapter for
if you like
free,
this
and
one
yeah,
and you want the rest, pay for the last 6 chapters.
exactly. And you can start to see the demand for it. I'm often a fan of asking people to pay a little bit of money rather than free because it helps you to establish the demand, especially with if you're going to do a physical print of a book. Because when you do a physical print of a book, you often, the more books that you buy from the publishers, often the price decreases. So it makes it more profitable if you order, say, 10,000 books than if you order 100 books.
True.
But you don't want to be stuck in your bedroom with piles and piles of 10,000 books because only your mum bought one. So
Yeah.
if you ask people, even if it's $1 or $2, that will give you a much better number of who's ready to pay for your content versus who is ready to take it for free. And
But
again, this is
how do you deal with the plagiarism then? I mean, if you're only doing an ebook, you're downloading it,
oh
and they
yeah,
can just they can publish it anywhere. If you have a physical one, it's not really possible unless you are doing pictures of 200 pages, of course.
that's right. Well, to be honest, I think that if people want to support you, and because your book in general will be a niche product, I wouldn't worry so much about
Ah,
piracy.
okay.
You are always going to get ripped off every now and then, but I saw, for example, Tim Ferriss launched his book. I think it was called the 4 Hour Chef,
Work
or the
week,
4 Hour cookbook or something. He had a
work
sequel,
week. Yeah.
and for that he knew that he was going to have lots of illegal downloads. So what he did was he created his own torrent his own illegal download, and what that was way better than what anybody else could normally get. So in his torrent bundle, he put all the chapters that had been cut out of the original book. And I think he put all the notes, the hand-drawn notes and sketches in the book's production. He put videos, and he put the raw audio files of interviews, and he put all kinds of stuff. And it was probably a good gigabyte or so of information. But it didn't really give everything from the book, maybe a couple of sample chapters here and there. So it meant that anybody who wanted it for free got loads of extra stuff, and then they were convinced and sort of said, you know what, I will buy it. But if someone is going to look for your book for free and take it for free, they were never really going to pay for it anyway, because they
True.
get to the point they see it, they're made aware of the book, and they say, oh yeah, I could get it for a couple of dollars, but I don't want to spend those couple of dollars. I'm going to see if I can get it for free. You're not really losing a customer, especially if you can convert that customer into a lifelong fan of your brand. So if you can say, well, they may have got they may have downloaded my book illegally, but they like what I'm coming out with. They're aware of me. It builds up visibility. That can also be a thing. And you can also give people a way that helps you to get the book for free. For example, you might say you can buy it for $2, but if you really want it for free, don't download it illegally. Send me an email and tell all of your friends about it, and I'll send you a free copy. So right there
Yes.
on your page, you can say, this is it. If you really can't afford that $2, help me out. And a lot of people are very happy to do that as well. So that can be a strategy. But for
Nice.
producing a book, let's move to producing a book. Now, I've only done books in English, so for Danish it might be a little different. But what I like to do is I like to see if you can make the process as smooth and as fast as possible. So typically, if you've got lots of audio files from a podcast, I'll go to a website like Casting Words. I use Casting Words a lot, and they're a transcription service. Now, you can find transcription services in any language, but basically what you do is you upload an audio file of whatever it is that you've got, and somebody listens to that audio file and types it out for you. It's a bit like text-to-speech recognition, but you're getting a human being doing it. And that's great because they can add little things like if you've got two people talking, person A and person B, they will transcribe the two different voices so that you can read the interview. And also because they're a human, you can ask them to take out all of the ums and ahs and false start sentences where people say, oh, what I mean to say is, oh, sorry, I made a mistake. So all of that stuff goes. And oftentimes those transcripts come back within a day. And you can typically pay like $1 per minute of audio, something like that. If it's English audio. Danish audio might be a bit more specialist, but you can find transcription services all over the place. There's plenty of secretaries.
Upwork, freelancer, yes.
And that's really cool. Once you have that, I would start to think about editing your content, and you can edit your content by yourself in a word processor so that you pick the best bits. But you can also go to websites like guru.com or upwork.com, and you can find people who will help you edit your transcripts to make sure that everything is consistent, make sure all the grammar is correct, all that kind of thing. And it really helps make a better product. And the reason why I like Guru and Upwork is because you can find people who are really, really great at it, and they do it so easily. There are a lot of school teachers in America who, over their summer vacations, they just go on these websites and they just proofread people's texts because they're used to marking kids' books, all the time. And they just rip through it and completely transform it. And it's a great way to find editors. And there's so many on there that you can even be very specific and say, I'm looking for someone who's got experience editing business books. And that really makes the difference. And then I would head on over to something like 99designs.com to get the front cover made. I don't know if you've used 99 Designs. It's very nice, very fast. And then once it's all together, there are lots of online publishing services, but one that's really great is called CreateSpace. And CreateSpace is owned by Amazon, and they give you all of the templates to help you design the book, and they give you lots of resources. They help check absolutely everything, and once your book is finished, it's for sale right there on Amazon. And they'll also help you generate an EPUB version for the Kindle and all that kind of thing. And so you can be on Amazon.com, .de, .co.uk, all of those. And what's great is they have printing facilities in different countries. So it's print on demand. So as soon as somebody orders one book, that book is printed in the country where it's ordered from and shipped directly to the person. So the beauty of this means that if you want to add a new chapter, for example, if you're making one new chapter a month, you can just upload the new files to Casting Words, and whoever buys the book gets the most recent copy of the book. And this is really useful if one of your startups, I don't know, goes out of business or something, and you want to delete them, as well. So it's super useful. And then you've got the power of Amazon behind you, so they will help market and advertise the book. They will do various sales, and you can set how much profit margin you want to take from your book. So you might start off with a sale where you don't take very much profit when you first launch it, and then increase the price later on once you've got some good reviews.
Nice.
Yeah.
Actually, I have one thing to add regarding the website. Right now we're just doing a podcast where we're interviewing successful entrepreneurs. Mm-hmm. But I think another important aspect of entrepreneurship is also to talk with those who failed, and why they failed.
Yeah.
And I know of a very cool website called startupgraveyard.io.
Nice.
You can put that in your notes. It's a really cool one, and I thought about implementing something similar like that on our page, because that will create extra value. I mean, saying to them that okay, those that we have in the podcast is the successful ones. But if you want to hear about those who failed and what they learned about it, go into our website. That would create a tremendous extra traffic, I think. What do you think about that idea?
Yeah, actually, learning from failure is a very popular trend. I was in Austria recently, and I was attending an event which I'm afraid the name of the event is a swear word, so I
Fuck
can't
up.
I can't mention it. But yeah,
Fuck up nights.
exactly.
Yeah, I heard about it.
Keep it family friendly.
Yeah, sorry.
Yeah, and that's great because it's not necessarily that the business has gone wrong in that case, but it could be the biggest mistakes that
Yes.
somebody made, and it's a nice, fun format. So any kind of integration with those kind of events can be really good, and you might want to think with your podcast about mixing it up a little bit, because you talked earlier about different formats, and at the moment you have the format where you just talk about the story of the entrepreneur. But of course, it's okay to do story episodes, to do screw-up episodes, to do consultation episodes, and have some of them long and some of them short. You can really play around and see what sticks with your audience. Because as long as it's more or less the same, then the audience will
So
like
you would
it.
actually encourage us to do that in the podcast as well, to not have only the successful ones, but also have those who failed.
Yeah.
I think that's good actually. At least to try it out and see if people likes to listen to that.
Yeah, I think so. I would definitely give it a try and see what kind of reaction you get. It can be a whole lot of fun. And speaking of all of these different nights, you wanted to think about events, right?
Yeah.
Tell me
True.
a little bit about what you're thinking about with events.
So there's two ways to do that. Either we record one live, saying that the next episode is gonna be these 3 startups, and we're gonna record them live, come and see it, right? That's one way to do it. Or we tell all the listeners and those that we interview that we gather them all to a networking event, because when you've been listening to the podcast, you kind of feel like you know them already because you heard their story. But while you, as we talked about, when you're on the run, while in the car or exercising, whatever, you won't really go in and check them out afterwards. I mean, some will, but the majority won't. But if they had to come to an event where they can actually meet them in person and shake their hands, and I thought about this when I heard the podcast, and they can ask them questions. That's what I was having in mind.
That's a really nice idea, and it's a really good way to get engagement from your community, especially when your community are all from one place. And the advantage of having a Danish language podcast, in your case, is that everyone's going to be within Denmark. It's not like if you have an English language podcast and you don't know if someone's from America or Australia, right? So you have that working for your advantage. The one thing to think about is, if you're doing a podcast live, is there really any advantage of recording the podcast live and as it happens? What would you hope that someone listening at home is getting out of a live podcast? Or is it more that you want to see people, have your audience watch the recording of it live?
Yeah, well, it's kind of both. The last thing is obviously sounds cool and could be interesting to just do, because you can do video and all those things, which is, by the way, a thing that we will add into the element in the future podcast as well, because we're doing it online, basically like you're doing here also. But the reason why the live version could be nice is kind of the same as with meeting those that have already been listening to. The only difference is that you're fresh in mind, right? You're listening to the questions, and we could have questions from the crowd during the live session. So it's not just me or my partners asking the same questions. It could also be the crowd doing it.
That's great. And actually, you're hitting on a number of really good things, because what you can do is you can really push the audience engagement. So your podcast will have the regular listeners, and then it will have its super fans, and it's the super fans who are going to be the ones coming to the event, asking the questions, and all that good stuff. So, what's this here? Oh, no. Sorry, I just saw something on my computer screen popping up there. So you're going to get all of this kind of engagement. So one thing that you can do is you can think really smart about how to capitalize on that engagement, because the first time that you run an event, if you run the event all by yourself, you're going to have to find the venue, you're going to have to find the startups, you're going to have to bring in the audience, you're going to have to sell the tickets, you're going to have to arrange the food, get the insurance, all this stuff, and it can be a nightmare, and it can be expensive, and if one person doesn't show up, it can ruin the whole thing. So a smarter way to think about it, and this would be something I'd really, really suggest that you do, especially with my background with knowledge events, is find a large event that's been running for a number of years that has a similar sort of audience and a similar sort of feel. Whether it's, in your case, it could be an entrepreneurship competition, it could be a business conference, something like that.
A place where there's already an audience.
A place where there's already an audience, and you'll know when their event is coming up. So maybe there's an event coming in 6 months' time, and you contact the organizers, and the organizers are already going to know who are the companies that are going to speak and who are the companies that are going to be there. And what you can do is you can work with the organizers and cover small interviews way before the event with the companies that are going to be there. Maybe it's just like a little 5-minute teaser or something like that. And that you put it out on your podcast, and maybe those podcast episodes become rebranded as the so-and-so event podcast, because maybe the event doesn't have a podcast, so you could be the podcast providers for that, which would be something that maybe they would pay you for. When it comes to the day of the event, that's when you work with the organizers to find a quiet room that's set aside that you can set up with all of your lights, cameras, sound equipment, all that stuff. And almost as soon as the speaker has come off stage, they go and they get their 5 questions from you, or however many minutes. And you can build in audience engagement because all of your audience can tweet in their favorite questions, and you get to ask them. So then even if they can't make it to the live event, then they're there. And it's another great way to get revenue, because you might have, the event organizers might have free tickets that you can give away to your audience as prizes. Or even better, they might have some kind of discount or affiliate option where anybody who comes from buymyticket.com/podcast name, not only do your podcast listeners get a little discount, but you might get a potential kickback too. So this is a really great way of turning something that would be very expensive to being something that can make you money. And if they're already paying for top entrepreneurs to be there at the event, you might get some slightly bigger names or slightly more interesting people, and they're all going to be in one place. So at a typical event, if you've got, you could easily have 12 podcasts worth of material made in one day of an event. So then it drastically reduces your costs, and then you can use that time to find other sponsors or something like that. And it's a great thing for events. Will have event sponsors, and it's great that you can say, hey, at the end of our podcast, we'll give a shout out to all of your various sponsors, and then you send the podcast to them, and then all of a sudden everybody at the sponsor companies is now listening to your podcast. And if there's any way that you can get into the email list of all of the hundreds or thousands of people at the conference, and they say, hey, don't forget to download the podcast where you can find out all about all the stuff that's going on behind the scenes. In one event, you can easily have a couple of thousand new subscribers if it's a big business event.
Could be, yeah. I think that's a really good idea. I know a few that I'm just that pops up in my mind, like Tech Barbecue, Danish Entrepreneurship Award, Venture Cup,
Yeah,
all these things. That could actually be interesting to get in touch with those and hear what if we do a live version of our podcast at your event, because as you said, it will it will it will take out of the how do you say, the areas that isn't sure regarding, are people coming, what about the expenses and all of those things I don't have to think about if I do it with somebody who's already having an event.
exactly. If you're the podcast guy, be the podcast guy. Don't be the event guy.
No,
Don't
that's true.
be the
It's just me. It's just because I love doing events. But that's actually that's a very valid point. And as you said, you could make affiliate partnership with Tech Barbecue, because a ticket costs money to be a part of it. But if people are listening to our podcast and want a ticket, they get 10% discount or something like that.
yeah.
If they use our name as the coupon code or something, right?
And if you have a really good relationship with the conference event organizers, then perhaps you can take the audio and the visuals directly from their soundboard, so that you can record the audio of the whole conference, and maybe you edit down, the best bits into a little package that sounds really great, because then all of a sudden, if you've got people talking about the startups and the noise of the audience laughing, cheering, booing at all the right places, you can get really strong content there. And of course, then if that content then becomes transcribed and goes into a book, and then all of a sudden, you're building up quite a lot. You will need to make sure, of course, that you get permission from the conference organizers and the speakers. But that's pretty straightforward to do.
Of course. Great idea. Lovely idea.
Great. And you had a question about getting listeners' feedback.
Yes. As I told in the beginning, it's kind of the same with the donations. People are listening to this on the run, but even though we're mentioning it, we do quite massively shares on different Facebook groups, but it's rarely that I get any feedback. We got it a little bit from the new format where we're asking the interviewers a problem. So we are sharing the problem and asking the groups what they have in, how should they solve this problem. That they give feedback about, but feedback about the podcast in general is very rare we get that.
Yeah.
So basically we don't know, we can see from the traffic that people are looking at it, listening to it, so in that sense it's going quite good, but we honestly don't know if they actually like it or not. There has been a few people doing comments and voting and rating it for it, but it's too little.
Yeah.
I want more of that, because otherwise we're just doing it from our own preferences.
Exactly. And getting feedback from a podcast can be super hard, but there's a couple of things to think about. The easiest way, and I know this will sound really stupid, but the easiest way to get feedback is to ask for it. So you can say right at the start of the show, just in a little thing, any feedback, send it to us.
You do that already.
Blah, blah, blah. Okay.
Everywhere.
Okay, that's good. Another thing you can do is you can incentivize feedback by saying each month we give a prize to the person with the best feedback or whoever sends the best email. And that's a really great way to encourage them right off the bat, so that then they say, what's in it for me?
Yes.
And prizes can be expensive, but if you're working with businesses, I would suggest ask these various startups, have they got anything that you could give away? It could be, just a t-shirt or a baseball cap, or have they got one of their products? Any kind of prize like that you can take straight from the startup. So it's a great way to promote the startup, but the competition of the week is always whoever sends the best comment, whoever...
This is a really good example. I like this a lot, actually, because they're not paying anything, So asking them, we're doing this problem, we're going to have some feedback, and it could be very nice if you give something away, something simple, like a product of yours or discount or something like that.
Yeah.
I think that's actually a good idea that might trigger some people at least.
Yeah. And another thing is, when you do get feedback, it may not be very often, but you want to celebrate the person who gives the feedback. So if you get an email from Joe Blogs and he says, I don't like how your microphone sounds or something like that, make sure you really make a big deal of, hey, this week we're using a new microphone thanks to Joe Blogs because he said that he didn't like it, so we took it on board. And you can come up with lots of intangible things to promote him.
Yeah.
So you can say, oh, he's our super fan, or you give him a special name. He's the hero of the week. You plug his website or whatever it is. And you really say, like, wow, this person sent in this comment and we love it. So, maybe we've got some free stuff. We'll send you some free swag. Maybe we'll send you a sticker with the podcast logo on, or whatever it is. Or they're first in line for the free tickets to the events. And the more that you can make a person feel like a hero for helping you, the better, because they really are the heroes. Because if they notice something and they tell you,
they took the time to actually write. So that's actually very important, I think. I mean, we write everybody back, but it's a balance, because we can afford more than these cheap microphones, and we're doing as we're doing at the moment with the quality of the sound and all those things. I mean, so it's a balance. It depends on what they're asking for. But at least embrace that they are taking the time to give us feedback.
Yeah,
I agree with that.
You can't always improve the problems that people mention, but you can certainly celebrate them. So just tell them thank you so much for the feedback, and make it a big deal. Definitely. Another thing that you can do is, and this is a little bit different, but it might take a little bit of time, but you can always run a focus group with your podcast. You can always get a group of people that you don't know and get them to download the podcast and listen to it and give you feedback. It may not be quite as good as regular listener feedback, but it may give you some good ideas or some interesting ideas. I'm not the world's biggest fan of focus groups, but in this case, especially when you're starting out, it can help to smooth over some bumps.
I mean, that's also a really good idea. However, that takes you back to the fact that they are still listening to this on the run. But if you're giving them something in turn, you're bracing that the fact that you say in the podcast, we need 5 people to be in our focus group, giving us ongoingly feedback. And if you're willing to do that, we make sure you get this and this and this in return. So I don't think they would do it for free unless it's somebody in my own network. But if you put up something that they gain something in return, that might be doable.
Yeah, you can definitely start with people in your own network, and it might be the easiest way to do it, where you just get them to listen to one episode and see what they think. And although using people in your own network is not necessarily the best, a lot of studies say that even if you do a sort of usability style test with just 5 people, you're going to find the biggest problems. So just a sample size of 5 can be enough to remove a lot of early teething problems. It's not going to be perfect, but just five of your friends will give you enough feedback to make the next few episodes. And then those next few improved episodes, then you can run that with your real audience.
At least as a start.
Yeah.
I agree with you.
Because any testing is better than no testing, even if the testing isn't great. And another thing that you can think of as well is matching feedback to growth. And this is a little bit more of an advanced trick, because I know that every podcast wants to get more listeners. And there's a very easy customer feedback system called Net Promoter Score. I don't know if you've ever heard of Net Promoter Score.
No.
So Net Promoter Score is really the world's most simple survey. It's a question that is, how likely are you on a scale of 1 to 10 to recommend this podcast to a friend or colleague? It's literally that. It's that one question, and you rate it out of 10. And if someone says they're 10 out of 10 or 9 out of 10 to rate your podcast, then you think, okay, yeah, they're pretty good. They really like it. If you're sort of in the middle, a 7, 6, 5, then that's okay. You like it, but maybe not that much. And if it's,
but they still need to click on that.
They do still need to.
But you could include that on the website. You can include it in a newsletter.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And then you also know that if the people are not likely to recommend it to a friend, then you know that you've got some problem somewhere. The problem is this Net Promoter Score doesn't tell you what you should change. It doesn't tell you what people like and what people dislike, but it does give you an overall rating of how well you're doing. So what it allows you to do is you ask this question several times a year, or or every episode, for instance, and you can say, okay, people listening to episode 1 wouldn't really recommend it, but episode 2 is a bit more, and episode 3 is even better. Yeah. So you can see that you're going in the right direction. And this is one of the things that we do, lots of companies do, just to see how well you're doing in general. It also allows you to then specifically target the people who write 9 or 10 out of 10. And if they put their email address in and rate you as 9 or 10, you can say, wow, thanks, that's great. Which friends would you like to share this with? Or would you consider sharing it on Facebook or tweeting about it or whatever? And that way, not only do you get customer feedback, but you get the ones who love it the most sharing it the most. And the ones who love it the most will have friends who will love it just as much. You don't really want to worry about the people who give it a 3 out of 10, because maybe they're not really your audience.
Would avoid
anyway.
that.
Yeah, you don't want everybody who will give you a 3 out of 10 rating to go tell all their friends.
True.
So that's worth checking out. And what I'll do, Espen, is I'll put links to all of the things that we've talked about in the comments, and we'll stream this on Facebook. And I hope that maybe everybody that's watching this will have learned something interesting, and maybe they've got some comments and suggestions for you as well.
That would be lovely.
Look forward to seeing them.
I would love to get some feedback from the rest of the community, and I promise that I would give it back to all the others as well when they're coming up for this one-on-one coaching session.
That's great.
It's been a good pleasure, Adam. A lot of good feedback and a lot of good ideas. Now it's just time to go out and test it.
Yeah.
And see what happens.
So I'd love for you to test some of these things. And maybe what we'll do is in a few weeks' time, or whenever you're ready, we'll have another call and we'll see what worked and what didn't, what moved forward and what slowed you down. And,
I'm into that.
Yeah, that's going to be a lot of fun. And maybe we'll do it live, face-to-face, and see how it goes, and bring in all the questions from the community as well.
I'm in for that as well.
Okay, so thank you very much for being our very first one-on-one guest, and I guess we'll see you very soon.
We will.
Bye.
Thank you for bye.